There's a special kind of pain that comes when your own children stop answering your calls. Evan Calder knew that pain better than most. 3 grown kids, all gone silent, their doors closed without explanation. At 58, he walked into the northern woods with just his German shepherd Koda, choosing isolation over the emptiness of waiting by a phone that never rang. Winter came hard and fast. One frozen morning, Koda pulled him off the trail towards something hidden in the pines. A cabin sat there with smoke rising from the chimney, warm and lived in. But when Evan knocked, no one answered. Inside, he found a fire still burning and photographs that stopped his heart. The cabin wasn't empty. Someone had been there, and Koda seemed to know exactly where he was going. What secret was waiting in those woods? Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 6 months earlier, Evan Calder's life looked entirely different. He lived in a modest 2-bedroom house on the quiet end of Maple Street in Brainerd, Minnesota. The kind of neighborhood where people waved from their porches and knew your name at the grocery store. The house wasn't much vinyl siding that needed paint, a small yard he kept neat, but it had been home for nearly 30 years. The place where he'd raised his 3 children with Anna, back when the rooms echoed with laughter and the refrigerator was covered in school artwork held up by magnets. Now the house felt too big and too quiet. Evan worked as an equipment operator for the County Road Commission until his retirement 2 years prior. 40 years of driving plows in winter, graders in summer, maintaining the roads that connected small towns across northern Minnesota. It was honest work, the kind that left you tired at the end of the day, but satisfied you'd done something useful. He'd been good at it, reliable, the guy they called when a storm hit hard and they needed someone who wouldn't quit until every road was passable. Retirement should have been peaceful. He had his pension, his health, and time to finally do the things he'd always put off. But peace proved elusive when the phone stopped ringing. It started gradually, the way these things often do. Small changes you don't notice until they've accumulated into something undeniable. Sarah was the oldest at 32. She'd always been the achiever, the one who color-coded her school notebooks and planned everything 3 steps ahead. She worked in marketing for a medical device company in Minneapolis, climbing the corporate ladder with the same determination she'd applied to everything since childhood. She used to call every Sunday evening, regular as clockwork, filling him in on her week, asking about his. Then the calls became every other week, then monthly, then texts instead of calls. Short ones. Busy with work. Talk soon. Soon never came. Marcus was 29, the middle child and the quiet one. He taught 8th grade English at a middle school in Duluth, 2 hours north. He'd always been sensitive, thoughtful, the kid who'd cry at movies and bring home injured birds to nurse back to health. After college, he'd grown more reserved, harder to read. But they'd maintained a connection through their shared love of fishing. Every few months, Marcus would drive down, and they'd spend a Saturday on one of the lakes, not talking much, just enjoying the stillness. The last time they'd gone was March. Marcus had seemed distracted, troubled. When Evan asked if everything was okay, Marcus just nodded and said he had a lot on his mind with work. That was the last time Evan saw him. The planned June trip got cancelled, then the August one. Marcus stopped returning calls altogether. Lucy was the baby at 26, and she'd always held a special place in Evan's heart. Maybe because she was the youngest, or maybe because she reminded him so much of Anna, the same quick smile, the same way of tilting her head when she was thinking something through. Lucy worked as a nurse at a hospital in St. Paul, rotating through the emergency room and intensive care unit. She had Anna's compassion, that deep well of empathy that made her perfect for the work. She'd visit once a month, bringing groceries and staying for dinner, updating him on her life. Those visits became less frequent through the spring. Then they stopped entirely by summer. Her texts became sporadic, apologetic. "Sorry, Dad. Crazy at work." love you. But there was something in those messages that felt hollow, like she was saying words without meaning them. By July, Evan couldn't ignore it anymore. His 3 children had effectively erased him from their lives. He'd replay conversations in his mind, searching for the moment he'd said something wrong, done something to offend. Had he been too critical, too distant? He'd never been the warm and fuzzy type, but he'd always been present, always tried to be supportive. When Sarah's first serious relationship ended badly in college, he'd driven through the night to be there. When Marcus struggled with depression in his early 20s, Evan had sat with him through the dark hours, just being there. When Lucy decided to become a nurse, he'd been the first to tell her how proud he was. Where had he failed them? Anna would have known what to do. She always understood the kids in ways he didn't, could read between the lines of their moods and silences. But Anna had been gone for 5 years now, taken by cancer that moved through her body faster than any of them could process. The diagnosis came in January, and by April she was gone. Those 3 months were a blur of hospital rooms and hushed conversations, of holding her hand and trying to be strong when everything inside him was breaking apart. The kids had been there through it all, solid and present. In the immediate aftermath, they'd pulled together, supporting each other through the grief. But as time passed, something shifted. Evan couldn't pinpoint exactly when, but somewhere in the years after Anna's death, a distance grew between him and his children that he couldn't bridge. After Anna passed, Evan found himself alone in a house full of memories. Friends from work suggested he get a dog, something to keep him company. He'd always liked dogs, but Anna had allergies, so they'd never had one. 6 months after her funeral, he went to the county animal shelter, thinking he'd just look around. That's where he met Koda. The German Shepherd was 3 years old, abandoned by owners who'd moved and couldn't take him along. He sat at the back of his kennel, watching Evan with intelligent brown eyes that seemed to see right through him. When the shelter worker opened the gate, Koda walked calmly to Evan and sat at his feet, looking up with patient dignity. No jumping, no excessive excitement, just quiet presence. Evan knelt down and the dog leaned against him, steady and warm. "I think he's choosing you," the shelter worker said. Evan took him home that day. Koda became his constant companion, the one living thing that seemed to need him. They fell into routines, morning walks before the heat set in, evenings on the back porch, Koda's head resting on Evan's knee while he read or watched the sun set. The dog seemed to sense Evan's moods, offering comfort without demands, company without complications. As his children drifted further away, Koda remained constant. By October, Evan had exhausted every attempt to reconnect. He'd driven to Minneapolis to Sarah's apartment, but she'd been cold, distant, claiming work deadlines and cutting the visit short after 20 minutes. He'd shown up at Marcus's school, but his son had looked almost panicked to see him, making excuses about parent-teacher conferences and promising to call later. He never did. Lucy had been the hardest. She'd simply refused to answer the door when he knocked, though he could see her shadow moving behind the curtains. The rejection carved something hollow inside him. He started having trouble sleeping, lying awake at night trying to make sense of it. Had Anna told them something before she died, some secret about him that turned them away? Had he unknowingly committed some unforgivable offense? The not knowing was worse than any answer could have been. In early November, sitting in his too-quiet house with Koda at his feet, Evan made a decision. He couldn't keep living like this, waiting for a phone that never rang, driving hours to see children who didn't want to see him. The pain of reaching out and being rejected was worse than the loneliness of isolation. At least alone in the woods, he wouldn't spend every day wondering what he'd done wrong. He'd always loved the wilderness. As a younger man, he'd taken the kids camping every summer, teaching them to fish and identify animal tracks, to find north by the stars. Some of his best memories were from those trips: Marcus catching his first walleye, Sarah triumphantly starting a fire with flint and steel, Lucy squealing with delight when a deer wandered through their campsite. The woods had always felt like home, in a way that buildings never quite did. Evan spent a week preparing. He sold his truck and bought a used four-wheel drive Bronco better suited for rough terrain. He packed camping gear, warm clothes, freeze-dried food, a good tent, and cold weather sleeping bag. He withdrew cash from his accounts, enough to last a year if he was careful. He left a note for his neighbor, asking her to keep an eye on the house and forward any important mail to a P.O. box he'd rented in Grand Marais, a small town on the north shore of Lake Superior. He didn't tell his children he was leaving. What would be the point? They'd made it clear they didn't want him in their lives. On a grey morning in mid-November, Evan loaded everything into the Bronco, called Koda into the passenger seat, and drove north. He didn't look back at the house. There was nothing there for him anymore except memories and silence. He drove for hours, taking state highways and then county roads, then Forest Service roads that narrowed to barely more than trails. He was heading for the wilderness area near the Canadian border, a vast expanse of forest and lakes where a man could disappear if he wanted to. He'd studied maps, identified areas remote enough that he could camp undisturbed through the winter if necessary. The landscape changed as he drove north. Small towns gave way to unbroken forest. The roads became rougher, the houses fewer and farther between. By late afternoon, he was deep in the Superior National Forest, surrounded by towering pines and the kind of silence you only find far from civilization. He found a logging road that hadn't been used in years, overgrown but still passable. He followed it for 3 miles until it dead-ended at a small clearing near a creek. The spot was perfect water nearby, good drainage, protected from the wind by a ridge of granite. He could hear the creek flowing over stones, a sound that would keep him company. This would be home. Over the next few days, Evan set up camp. He pitched his tent in a spot that would stay dry, built a fire ring with stones from the creek, hung a tarp for additional shelter from rain and snow. He established routines, fetching water, gathering firewood, fishing the creek for brook trout. Koda adapted quickly, exploring the area but never straying far, as if understanding that they needed to stay together out here. The days took on a rhythm: wake with the sun, start a fire, make coffee, spend the morning securing food, fishing, setting snares for rabbits, checking the supplies. Afternoons were for maintenance, keeping the camp in order, chopping wood, reinforcing the shelter. Evenings, he'd sit by the fire with Koda beside him, watching the stars emerge. It should have been peaceful. In many ways it was. The physical work tired him in a good way, the kind of exhaustion that led to dreamless sleep. The quiet was profound after years of living near traffic and neighbors. Nature's sounds, wind in the pines, birds calling. The creek's constant murmur became his soundtrack. But the loneliness followed him into the woods. Every evening, he'd pull out his phone, though it had no signal this deep in the forest. He'd look at the photos stored there: Sarah's college graduation, Marcus at his first teaching job, Lucy in her nursing scrubs on her first day of work. Family pictures from before Anna got sick, when they'd all been together and happy. He'd think about calling them, even though he couldn't, even though they wouldn't answer. One photo he looked at more than the others, worn from being opened so many times on his phone. It was from 1998, taken at a lake during one of their camping trips. Anna stood in the shallows with Lucy, who was maybe 2 years old, chubby-cheeked and giggling. Sarah and Marcus were building a sandcastle nearby. Evan had been behind the camera, capturing a perfect moment of his family, whole and joyful. He studied that photo every night, searching for clues to what had gone wrong, when the fractures had started that would eventually break them apart. The cold came early that year. By late November, snow was falling regularly, accumulating in drifts that transformed the forest into something from a storybook. Evan's camp became increasingly difficult to maintain. Gathering firewood meant trudging through knee-deep snow. The creek began to ice over, requiring him to break through to reach water. His tent, rated for 3 seasons, struggled against temperatures that regularly dropped below 0 at night. Koda's behavior began to change. The dog would stand at the edge of camp, staring into the woods with his ears pricked forward, alert to something Evan couldn't detect. Sometimes Koda would whine softly, a sound of uncertainty that was unlike him. When they'd hike to check snares or gather fallen branches, the dog would occasionally pull in a direction that wasn't part of their usual routes, insistent in a way that seemed purposeful. Evan dismissed it at first. Dogs sense things humans didn't: wildlife, distant storms, changes in air pressure. But as the behavior continued, he began to wonder if Koda was picking up on something more specific. 3 weeks into December, a severe weather warning came through on his weather radio. A major system was moving in from Canada, bringing dangerous cold and heavy snow. The kind of storm that killed people who weren't prepared. Evan knew he should probably hike out, get to civilization until it passed. But the thought of returning to Brainerd, to that empty house, and the possibility of running into one of his children who'd look through him like he wasn't there, he couldn't face it. He decided to ride it out. He'd weathered storms before. He had enough food, enough firewood. He'd be fine. The morning the storm was supposed to hit, Evan woke to an eerie stillness. The sky was a flat grey, the kind that promised serious snow. The temperature had dropped overnight to -15, and his breath created clouds of vapor inside the tent. Koda was already awake, staring at the tent entrance with that focused intensity he'd been showing lately. "What is it, boy?" Evan asked, his voice rough from disuse. He'd barely spoken in weeks. The dog looked at him, then back at the entrance, then whined. "Come on. Let's get the fire going before this storm hits." They emerged from the tent into the pre-dawn darkness. Evan's hands ached from the cold as he worked to restart the fire from last night's embers. The wind was picking up, making the pines sway and groan. Snow began to fall, light at first, then heavier. Koda suddenly tensed, then took off into the woods. "Koda, here!" Evan called, alarmed. The dog never ran off like that. But Koda was gone, crashed through the underbrush in a direction they'd never explored. Evan grabbed his pack, checked that his knife was on his belt, and followed. He couldn't lose the dog out here. Koda was all he had left. The tracks were easy to follow in the fresh snow, but the storm was intensifying rapidly. Within minutes, visibility dropped. The wind howled through the trees, and snow came down so thick Evan could barely see 10 feet ahead. He kept his eyes on Koda's tracks, calling for the dog, increasingly worried. He'd been following for maybe 20 minutes, though it was hard to judge time in the whiteout, when he nearly walked straight into Koda. The dog sat in the snow, perfectly still, looking ahead. Evan followed his gaze. Through the screen of falling snow and swaying pines, he saw it. A cabin. Smoke rose from its stone chimney, grey against the white sky. Warm light glowed from its windows. It was substantial log construction, well maintained, with a covered porch and shutters on the windows. This wasn't some abandoned hunting shack. Someone lived here, but that was impossible. Evan had studied the maps extensively. There were no structures in this area, no private land. This was deep national forest. The nearest marked cabin was 15 miles south, yet here it stood, solid and real, promising warmth and shelter from the storm that was quickly becoming life-threatening. Evan approached slowly, Koda at his side. The dog's earlier agitation had transformed into calm certainty, as if he'd accomplished what he'd set out to do. The cabin was even more impressive up close. The logs were hand-hewn, fitted together with expert craftsmanship. The porch was swept clean of snow recently, by the looks of it. A stack of firewood sat under a tarp, neatly split and organized. This was someone's home, carefully maintained. But there were no vehicle tracks, no snowmobile trail, no footprints except the ones he and Koda were making. How did anyone reach this place? Evan climbed the 3 steps to the porch, his boots heavy with snow. He knocked on the door, loud enough to be heard over the wind. No answer. He knocked again, harder. "Hello? Anyone home? I need help." Still nothing. He tried the handle. expecting it to be locked. It wasn't. The door swung open, and warmth rushed out to meet him. Evan stepped inside, Koda following close behind. The door closed behind them, muffling the howl of the wind. The cabin's interior was a single large room with a sleeping loft, accessed by a ladder. A fire burned in the stone fireplace, crackling and throwing dancing shadows across the walls. The warmth was almost overwhelming after the brutal cold outside. Evan's face tingled as feeling returned to his numb cheeks. "Hello," he called again, his voice echoing slightly in the space. "I don't mean to intrude. The storm, I need shelter." No response. But the cabin was clearly occupied. Recently, a coffee mug sat on the rough-hewn table in the center of the room. Evan touched it cautiously, still warm. Someone had been drinking from it within the last hour, maybe less. A plate beside it held crumbs from what looked like toast. A coat hung on a peg by the door, still damp from snow. Boots sat beneath it, men's size 10 or 11, mud still caked on the treads. Whoever lived here had just been present. Might still be present. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Evan said to the empty room. "Just need to wait out the storm. I'll leave as soon as it's safe." The silence felt watchful somehow, as if the cabin itself were listening. Koda moved through the space with surprising confidence, sniffing along the baseboards, tail relaxed. He showed none of the wariness he'd display in a truly unfamiliar place. Instead, he walked to the fireplace and lay down on a worn rug there, settling in as if he'd done so 100 times before. "Koda, what?" Evan started, but the dog just looked at him with calm eyes. Something wasn't right here. The dog's behavior, the occupied but empty cabin, the lack of any tracks leading to or from the place. Evan's instincts, honed by decades of working outdoors and reading weather and situations, told him to be careful. But the storm outside was intensifying. Through the windows, he could see nothing but white. The wind rattled the shutters and screamed around the eaves. This was a full-blown blizzard now, the kind that dropped 2 feet of snow in a few hours and left drifts 10 feet high. Going back out there would be suicide. He was trapped here, at least for the night. Maybe longer. Evan moved slowly through the cabin, examining it more closely. The construction was old but solid, probably built 60 or 70 years ago, maybe more. The furniture was simple and functional. The table and 4 chairs, a counter with a hand pump for water, open shelving displaying tin plates and cups, a cast-iron stove for cooking. The fireplace dominated one wall, built from river stones, fitted together with remarkable skill. A bookshelf stood in one corner, filled with paperbacks whose spines were cracked from repeated reading. Field guides to wilderness survival, plant identification, animal tracking. A few novels, Cormac McCarthy, Jim Harrison, Thomas McGuane. Whoever lived here liked spare, masculine prose about hard men in hard places. The sleeping loft held a narrow bed made up with military precision, the blankets pulled tight and tucked. A trunk sat at the foot of the bed, closed. Evan didn't open it. There were limits to how much he'd intrude, trapped or not. But on the mantel above the fireplace, something caught his eye. A small wooden carving, maybe 4 inches tall. The wood was dark with age and handling, polished smooth by years of being picked up and held. The craftsmanship was remarkable, every detail rendered precisely, from the individual claws to the texture of fur suggested by careful knife work. Evan's breath caught in his throat. He knew this carving. He'd made it. 25 years ago, during a long winter when work was slow, Evan had taught himself to carve. He'd always been good with his hands, and he found the patient work of shaping wood meditative. He'd started with simple projects, a spoon, a letter opener, then moved to more complex pieces. He'd made 3 bears, identical in design, one for each of his children. He'd given them out at Christmas, 1999. Sarah was 11, Marcus 8, Lucy just 3 years old. He'd spent months on them, working in the garage after the kids were in bed, wanting to give them something meaningful, something made with his own hands that they could keep forever. Sarah had kept hers on her dresser through high school. Marcus had taken his to college. Lucy, too young to appreciate it, had mostly used hers as a toy, dragging it around the house, taking it to bed. Anna used to joke that the bear would be bald from handling by the time Lucy was grown. Evan picked up the carving from the mantel, turning it over in his hands. On the bottom, barely visible, were his initials, E.C. He always marked his work, a habit from his father who'd been a carpenter. This was his carving, no question. But which child's? And how did it end up here, in a cabin that shouldn't exist, miles from anywhere? His mind raced through possibilities, none of them making sense. Had one of his children been here? Were they living in this cabin? But that was absurd. Sarah worked in Minneapolis. Marcus taught in Duluth. Lucy was a nurse in St. Paul. None of them had any reason to be in this remote wilderness. And even if they did, why would they have brought a childhood keepsake? Unless a cold realization crept through him. What if his children hadn't just cut him off? What if something had happened to one of them? What if someone was in trouble, hiding out here, and Evan's months of isolation meant he'd missed it completely? He pulled out his phone, even though he knew it was useless. No signal, no way to call anyone, to check if his children were safe. The storm raged outside, trapping him with this impossible mystery. Koda stirred by the fire, lifting his head to look toward the door, his ears pricked forward, alert. He made a low sound in his throat, not quite a growl, but a vocalization of awareness. Someone was outside. Evan moved to the window, peering through the gap in the shutters. The snow was so thick he could barely see 3 feet beyond the glass. But there, a shadow, a shape moving through the white, human-sized, walking slowly around the perimeter of the cabin. His heart hammered. The cabin's occupant returned, one of his children, someone else entirely. He went to the door, hand on the knob, then hesitated. Something held him back. The way Koda had reacted, alert but not aggressive. The way the figure outside moved, circling rather than approaching. This didn't feel like someone coming home. It felt like someone watching. Evan called out through the door, "I'm not here to cause problems. The storm forced me inside. I'll leave as soon as it's safe." The shadow stopped moving. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the figure retreated, walking backward into the snow until it disappeared completely into the white. Evan waited, but whoever it was didn't return. Or if they did, they stayed far enough away that he couldn't see them. He turned back to the cabin's interior, the wooden bear still in his hand. He studied it under the lamplight, searching for any clues he'd missed. The wear pattern on the wood told him it had been handled frequently, carried in a pocket perhaps. Whoever had this bear touched it often, found comfort in it. On the table, he noticed the journal for the first time, leather-bound, about the size of a paperback book, lying beside the coffee mug. He'd been so focused on the bear that he'd overlooked it. Evan opened it carefully. The first page had a date from 4 months ago. The handwriting was immediately familiar, small, precise letters that slanted slightly to the right. Marcus's handwriting, the same script he'd used on homework and essays throughout school. His son had been here. Was perhaps still here. The first entry was brief. Day 1. Found the cabin. It'll do. Need time to think. Need distance from everything. Hope Dad is okay wherever he is. Evan's vision blurred with tears. Marcus had been worried about him. Even while pulling away, even while disappearing, his son had been thinking about him. He flipped through the pages, scanning entries. They were sparse, sometimes days between them, but they painted a picture of someone struggling with a profound internal conflict. References to the truth, to what we found, to Mum's secret. Mentions of Sarah and Lucy, of arguments and difficult decisions, and repeatedly references to watching someone. to making sure someone stayed safe. Watching him, Evan realized. Marcus had been watching him. His son had been in these woods the entire time. Evan had, observing from a distance, making sure his father survived the isolation he himself had caused. The storm outside intensified. Wind hammering the cabin's walls, snow piled against the windows. Evan was trapped here with his son's journal, his son's childhood bare, and the ghost of his son's presence. And somewhere out in that storm, Marcus was watching. Evan spent the night reading Marcus's journal by lamplight while the storm raged outside. The entries were sporadic, sometimes separated by weeks, but they told a story of a man wrestling with impossible choices. Marcus had arrived at the cabin in early August, apparently knowing about its existence somehow, though he never explained how. The early entries focused on practical matters, securing food, maintaining the shelter, preparing for winter. But interwoven with the mundane details were glimpses of the emotional turmoil driving him. Saw Dad today on the ridge above his camp. He was splitting wood, methodical as always. Wanted to call out to him, but how do I even start that conversation? Hey, Dad. Sorry we all vanished, but here's why no. Can't do it. Not yet. Another entry, 3 weeks later. He's losing weight. Not eating enough. Koda's keeping him company at least. I left a rabbit near his camp last night. Made it look like a predator kill. He found it this morning, watched him skin and cook it. At least he's getting protein. Marcus had been taking care of him from a distance, leaving food, ensuring Evan survived. The thought brought a complicated mixture of emotions, gratitude, confusion, anger at the deception. But it was the entries about the truth that consumed Evan's attention as the night wore on. Sarah called again. She wants to tell Dad everything, get it over with. Lucy refuses to even discuss it, says some secrets are better left buried, and here I am, hiding in the woods like a coward, unable to face him or make a decision. Mom would be so disappointed in all of us. What secret? What had they found that was so devastating it had torn the family apart? Evan flipped forward, searching for more details. The journal's middle section had pages that seemed to have been torn out, leaving only ragged edges. Whatever Marcus had written there, he'd removed it. Too personal? Too revealing? Then, tucked between pages near the back of the journal, Evan found the photograph. It was a Polaroid, faded and creased from being handled. The image showed Anna in a hospital bed, holding a newborn baby wrapped in a pink blanket. Lucy, Evan realized. This was from the day she was born. But the angle was wrong. Someone had taken this photo from the side of the bed, not from where Evan had been standing. And visible in the frame, resting on Anna's shoulder, was a hand. A man's hand, wearing a distinctive silver watch with a black leather band. Evan didn't recognize the watch. It wasn't his. He turned the photo over. On the back, in Anna's handwriting, "James, thank you for being here. I'll never forget this moment. A. James." Who was James? Evan's mind spun. Anna had been in the hospital for Lucy's birth for 2 days. He'd been there the whole time, or so he thought. But there had been moments when nurses had asked him to step out, when Anna had said she needed to rest. Had someone else been there? Someone she'd called? Someone she wanted present? The implications made him dizzy. Anna's occasional unexplained sadness. Her trips to visit old college friends that sometimes lasted a weekend. The way she'd sometimes look at Lucy with an expression Evan couldn't quite read. Love, certainly, but something else underneath. Regret? Longing? He forced himself to keep reading the journal. Marcus's later entries confirmed his growing fears. Found the letters in Mum's things after the funeral, hidden in the back of her closet, in a box marked College Memories. Took me 2 months to work up the courage to read them. Wish I never had. Sarah found the DNA test kit in the drugstore, insisted we all take one. Lucy thought it was a fun sister thing. Then the results came. 99.7% probability. that Lucy shares only one parent with Sarah and me. Evan had to stop reading, pressing his palms against his eyes. The journal confirmed what the photograph suggested. Lucy wasn't his biological daughter. 26 years. She'd been his daughter for 26 years. He'd held her moments after she was born, fed her bottles at 2 in the morning, taught her to walk and read and ride a bike. He'd sat through every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every milestone. He'd loved her completely, without reservation. And none of that changed because of genetics. But the betrayal, Anna's betrayal, cut deep. She'd kept this secret her entire adult life, carried it through their marriage, taken it to her grave. She'd let him love Lucy fully, while knowing the truth was something else entirely. Who was James? An old boyfriend? A colleague? Someone Anna had loved before Evan, or someone she'd turned to during their marriage? The questions multiplied, each one more painful than the last. Marcus's journal entries became more anguished as they continued. Sarah wants to tell Dad immediately. She says he deserves to know, that keeping it secret makes us complicit in Mom's lie. Lucy is devastated. She's convinced Dad will reject her if he finds out. Says she can't bear to see disappointment in his eyes when he looks at her. I'm caught between them, unable to make a decision. So they'd made a different choice. They'd chosen silence and distance rather than confrontation. They'd decided that cutting him off was somehow kinder than telling him the truth. Evan understood their reasoning, even as it infuriated him. They were trying to protect him from pain, trying to protect Lucy from rejection, trying to preserve some version of their family, even if it meant destroying it in a different way. But they'd stolen his agency. They'd made a decision that affected him profoundly, without giving him any say in it. The storm began to subside as dawn approached. The wind's howl dropped to a steady whisper, and the snow tapered off. Through the cabin's windows, Evan could see the first hints of grey light in the east. He'd been awake all night, reading and rereading the journal, studying the photograph, trying to piece together a story from fragments and implications. Koda stirred from his spot by the fireplace, stretching and yawning. The dog came to Evan, pressing his head against his knee, offering comfort in the only way he knew how. "You knew, didn't you?" Evan said softly, scratching behind the dog's ears. "You knew Marcus was here. That's why you led me to this place." Koda's brown eyes looked up at him, with patient understanding. Evan stood, his joints stiff from sitting in the wooden chair all night. He needed to move, to think, to process everything he'd learned. He added wood to the fire, made coffee using the supplies he found in the cabin's small pantry. The simple actions helped ground him. As he stood at the window watching the dawn, he noticed fresh footprints in the snow outside. Boot prints, leading from the tree line to the cabin's porch, then away again. Recent made within the last hour, while he'd been absorbed in the journal. Marcus had come close, perhaps looked through the window, seen his father inside, and retreated once more. Still watching, still unable to approach. Evan made a decision. He would wait here. Marcus would have to return eventually. This was his shelter, his supplies, and when he did, they would talk. Father and son, finally, after months of silence and secrets. He wrote a note on a blank page at the back of the journal. "Marcus, I found your journal. I know about Lucy, about James, about the DNA test. I know why you all disappeared. I'm not angry, or maybe I am. But that's not what matters. What matters is that you're my son, and Lucy is my daughter, and nothing changes that. Please come talk to me. Dad." He left the journal open on the table where Marcus would see it. Then he settled in to wait. The sun rose fully, casting long blue shadows across the snow. Evan waited, but Marcus didn't appear. The footprints outside remained the only evidence his son had been near. By mid-morning, restlessness drove Evan to explore the cabin more thoroughly. If Marcus had brought Anna's letters here, they might still be somewhere in the space. Evan needed to understand the full story, not just fragments glimpsed through journal entries and a photograph. He started with the trunk at the foot of the bed in the loft. The lid opened smoothly, hinges well oiled. Inside, folded clothes, flannel shirts, thermal underwear, several pairs of wool socks. Men's clothing, size that would fit Marcus. Beneath the clothes, wrapped in a plastic bag to protect it from moisture, he found what he was looking for. A metal box, perhaps 8 inches by 10 inches, painted dark green. The kind of box used to store important documents. The latch was simple, no lock. Evan lifted the lid. Letters. Dozens of them, tied together with a faded red ribbon that had once been bright. The envelopes were yellowed with age, addressed to Anna Winters, her maiden name at various addresses. The oldest postmarked 1989, the most recent from just 6 years ago, only months before Anna's cancer diagnosis. Evan's hands shook slightly as he untied the ribbon and removed the first letter from its envelope. The paper was thin, the kind used for international mail to save weight. The handwriting was neat, masculine, the words carefully chosen. "Dear Anna, I'm writing this from a port whose name I can't tell you, en route to a place I can't describe. I miss you more than I thought possible to miss another person. The ocean is vast and empty, and I think about you constantly, your laugh, the way you scrunch your nose when you're thinking, the conversations that last until dawn. When I get back, I'm going to marry you. I've decided. I don't care if it's too fast or too soon. I know what I want, and it's a life with you. Wait for me. Love always, James." The date on the letter was March 1989. Evan and Anna hadn't met until 1991. He read letter after letter, piecing together a story Anna had never told him. James Haldren had been her boyfriend in college. They'd met at the University of Minnesota, both English majors, both part of a tight-knit group of friends who spent long nights discussing books and philosophy. By all accounts from these letters, they'd been deeply in love, planning a future together. Then, James had joined the Navy, swept up in a sense of duty and adventure. He'd gone through officer training and been assigned to a ship. His letters from that period were full of optimism and plans for their wedding when he returned. But in September 1990, the letters stopped. The last one Evan found from that period was dated the 28th of August 1990. James writing about an upcoming deployment he couldn't discuss in detail. Then nothing for 5 years. Evan flipped through the envelopes, checking dates. The next letter was postmarked January 1995 from Seattle, Washington. "Anna, I don't know if this address still reaches you. I don't know if you still think of me or if you've moved on. I hope you have. I hope you've built a good life. I need you to know that I didn't abandon you. I didn't choose to disappear. The ship went down in a storm off the coast of Somalia. I was one of 3 survivors, pulled from the water by local fishermen. I spent 2 years recovering in a village that had no phones, no way to contact anyone. By the time I made it back to civilization and managed to get word to the Navy, I'd been declared dead. It took another year to sort through the bureaucracy, to prove I was who I claimed to be. I tried to find you, but your parents said you'd married, moved away, started a new life. I'm writing this because you deserve to know I didn't leave you by choice. I loved you. I think part of me always will. But I understand if you don't want to hear from me. Just know I'm alive, and I'm grateful for the time we had. James." Evan sat on the edge of the bed, the letter in his hands, trying to imagine what Anna must have felt receiving this. She'd grieved James, mourned him, eventually moved forward. She'd met Evan, fallen in love or something like love, and built a life. Then, 4 years into their marriage, with 2 children, the man she'd thought was dead had returned. What had she done? What had she felt? The next letters provided answers. Anna had written back. She'd agreed to meet James, just once, to find closure. They'd met in Minneapolis at a coffee shop and talked for hours. James's next letter referenced that meeting. Seeing you was harder than I expected. You're just as beautiful as I remembered, just as sharp and funny. But you're someone's wife now, someone's mother. You've built something real and good, and I can see that you love your family. I won't disrupt that. But I want you to know if circumstances were different, if time had worked differently, we would have been happy together. I'm going to move on now, try to build something of my own. Thank you for meeting me. Thank you for the closure. Jay. But they hadn't moved on. The letters continued, sporadic but persistent. They'd become friends of a sort, staying in touch through occasional correspondence. James had settled in northern Minnesota, working as a wilderness guide and naturalist. Anna would write about her life, her children, the challenges and joys of motherhood. James would write about the woods, the changing seasons, the simple life he'd built. There was affection in the letters, clear and undeniable, but it seemed platonic. The romance had transformed into something else, a connection to a road not taken, a friendship built on shared history. Then came the letters from early 1997. James had written that he'd bought property near the Boundary Waters, was building a small cabin, planning to live out there full-time. He invited Anna to visit, to see the place, to understand the life he'd chosen. She'd gone. The next letter, dated May 1997, referenced our weekend together, thanked her for coming, apologized for making things complicated. Lucy had been born 9 months later, in February 1998. Evan found Anna's responses. Apparently James had kept copies of her letters mixed with his own. In them, Anna was clear. She couldn't leave Evan, couldn't disrupt Sarah and Marcus's lives. She'd made a choice when she married, and she would honor it. But she acknowledged her feelings for James, the complexity of loving two men in different ways, the impossibility of her situation. She'd decided to raise Lucy as Evan's daughter. She'd decided never to tell him about that weekend, about James's continued presence in her life through letters and rare visits. She'd decided to carry the secret alone. James had accepted her choice. His later letters were supportive, respectful, maintaining boundaries. He'd asked about Lucy occasionally, how she was growing, what she was like, but always framed it as general interest, never claiming paternity or rights. The final letter in the box was dated October 2018, just weeks before Anna's cancer diagnosis. James wrote about his health declining, about facing mortality, about his gratitude for their friendship despite its complications. He asked if Anna ever regretted her choices. Her response, tucked in the same envelope, was brief. I regret the deception, but never the choice. Evan has been the father Lucy needed. You gave me a gift, but he gave her a life. That matters more than biology. If anything happens to me, I trust you'll respect that. Evan carefully returned the letters to the box, retied the ribbon. His emotions were tangled: betrayal, grief, understanding, anger, all mixing together until he couldn't separate one from another. Anna had loved him. Of that, he was certain. But she'd also loved James, had maintained that connection even while building a life with Evan. She'd made impossible choices, borne secrets that must have weighed on her constantly. And his children had discovered all of this after her death, when there was no one to explain or provide context. They'd been left to piece together the story from letters and photographs, to interpret their mother's choices without her guidance. No wonder they'd been paralyzed. No wonder they'd chosen distance over confrontation. Evan descended from the loft, the metal box under his arm. He placed it on the table next to the journal, then added more wood to the fire. The cabin was warm, almost too warm, but he needed the activity, the simple ritual of maintaining the flame. Koda watched him from his spot by the hearth, patient and attentive. The dog seemed to understand that something significant was happening, that the atmosphere had shifted. Outside, the day was brilliant sunlight, reflecting off fresh snow, the sky a deep blue. The storm had passed completely, leaving the world transformed. The drifts were deep, perhaps 3 feet in most places, deeper where the wind had piled them against trees and rocks. Evan knew he should probably try to hike back to his camp, retrieve his tent and supplies. But the thought of leaving this cabin, of missing Marcus if he returned, kept him rooted. Besides, his camp was likely buried under snow. It could wait. He found paper and a pen in a drawer, Marcus's supplies, presumably, and sat down to write a more complete letter. The note he'd left in the journal was too brief, too emotionally restrained. His son needed to hear more. "Marcus," he wrote, "I've spent the night reading your journal and the letters you brought here. I know about James Haldren. I know about the weekend in 1997, about Lucy's paternity, about the DNA tests you and your sisters took. I know why you all disappeared from my life, and I understand you thought you were protecting me from pain, protecting Lucy from rejection, protecting the family from falling apart. But son, you need to understand something. Lucy is my daughter. She has been since the moment I first held her in the hospital. Biology doesn't determine fatherhood. Love does. Time does. Showing up every day does. I changed her diapers and walked the floor with her when she had colic. I taught her to read and helped her with homework. I sat in hospital waiting rooms when she had her tonsils out, held her when boys broke her heart, celebrated when she got into nursing school. Those experiences made me her father. James may have given her half her DNA, but I gave her everything else. And nothing changes that. I'm not angry with your mother. She made impossible choices in an impossible situation, and she did her best. I wish she'd told me yes. I wish we could have worked through it together. But I understand why she didn't. She was trying to protect everyone, just like you three tried to do. But here's what you need to know. Secrets don't protect people. They isolate them. They create the very pain they're meant to prevent. You've been out here for months, watching me from a distance, making sure I survived, leaving food like you were taking care of some wounded animal. But I don't need taking care of, Marcus. I need my son. Sarah needs her brother. Lucy needs her family. We all need each other, and we need the truth between us. So please, come back to the cabin. Let's talk, face to face. Let's figure out how to move forward together. I love you. I've always loved you. That hasn't changed, and it never will. Dad. He left the letter on the table, weighted down with the wooden bear. Then he prepared food soup from canned goods he found in the pantry. Bread he toasted over the fire. Simple, warm, enough for 2 people, if Marcus came. The afternoon passed slowly. Evan found himself thinking about Lucy, replaying memories of her childhood with new awareness. Had he unconsciously sensed she was different from Sarah and Marcus? Had some part of him known? He remembered her birth clearly. Anna had gone into labor early in the morning. They'd driven to the hospital through a February snowstorm, Anna timing contractions, Evan gripping the steering wheel and trying not to panic. Sarah and Marcus were with Anna's mother for the weekend. The labor had been long 16 hours. Evan had been there the whole time, or thought he had, but there had been moments when nurses had asked him to step out. Once, when Anna needed a particular examination, and once because she'd asked for privacy while she spoke with her doctor about something. He'd sat in the waiting room both times, 15 or 20 minutes each. Had James been there, slipping in during those windows? Anna's mother had come late in the afternoon, he remembered, and at some point Anna had asked both of them to give her some space, said she needed to rest. They'd gone to the cafeteria for coffee. Another 30 minutes, when James could have visited. When Evan had finally held Lucy, tiny, red-faced, perfect, he'd been overwhelmed with love. She'd gripped his finger with surprising strength, her eyes unfocused, but somehow seeing him, his daughter, his third child. He'd never questioned it, never wondered. Looking back now with the knowledge he had, he could see small things. Lucy's features were softer than Sarah's or Marcus's angular faces. Her hair was darker, almost black, where theirs was brown. Her eyes were hazel rather than the blue-grey he and Anna shared, but families were diverse, genetics were complicated, he'd never thought twice about it. More significantly, he'd never loved her differently. She'd been his from day one, completely and without reservation. That night, as darkness fell again, Evan heard footsteps on the porch. Koda lifted his head, ears forward, but didn't bark or growl. Recognition, not alarm. The door opened slowly. Marcus stood in the doorway. He looked rough, thinner than Evan remembered, his face hidden beneath an unkempt beard, his clothes worn and patched. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. But they were his son's eyes, the same ones that had looked up at him when Marcus was a boy, learning to fish, learning to drive, graduating from college. For a long moment, they just stared at each other across the cabin's warm interior. Then Marcus's face crumpled. "Dad," he said, voice breaking, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Evan crossed the space in 3 strides and pulled his son into his arms. Marcus collapsed against him, sobbing like he hadn't cried since he was a child. Evan held him, one hand on the back of his head, the other around his shoulders, the way he'd held him through nightmares and disappointments and grief when Anna died. "It's okay," Evan murmured. "You're here now. That's what matters." They stood like that for several minutes, Marcus crying out months of guilt and fear and confusion, while Evan simply held him steady. Koda came over and pressed against their legs, adding his own comfort to the reunion. Eventually Marcus pulled back, wiping his eyes with the heel of his hand. "You read everything." "I did. And you don't hate me?" "Hate us?" "No," Evan said firmly. "I'm hurt that you all thought you had to hide from me, but I don't hate anyone. Not you, not your sisters, not even your mother, for keeping secrets." Marcus moved to the table, sank into one of the chairs. Evan ladled soup into bowls, set one in front of his son along with bread. They ate in silence at first, the simple comfort of hot food, filling a need that went beyond hunger. Finally Marcus spoke. "Sarah wanted to tell you right away. She was ready to drive down the day after we got the DNA results. But Lucy—" He stopped, struggling with the words. "Tell me," Evan said gently. "Lucy was devastated. She said she couldn't bear to see you look at her differently. She was convinced you'd reject her, that she'd lose you as her father. She begged us not to tell you, said she'd rather just disappear from your life than face your disappointment." Evan's heart broke for his youngest daughter, for the pain she'd been carrying. "She thought I'd reject her? She thought biology would matter more than everything else. We tried to tell her it wouldn't, but she was so scared. And then weeks passed, and we hadn't called you, and it got harder and harder to know what to do. Sarah started avoiding you because she felt so guilty. I couldn't face you because I didn't know what to say. And Lucy just pulled back completely." Marcus continued, the words coming faster now, as if a dam had broken. "I came up here in August. I couldn't handle the guilt anymore, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on teaching. I took a leave of absence and just left. I knew you'd gone into the woods. Mum used to talk about this area, said it was where she and James used to meet sometimes. I thought maybe you'd come here too." "How did you know about this cabin?" Evan asked. "James built it, about 15 years ago. Mum came here a few times over the years, always telling you she was visiting college friends. She told me about it once, years ago, made me promise not to tell anyone. I think she knew, somehow she knew that someday I might need to know about this place." Evan absorbed this, another layer of Anna's secret life revealing itself. She'd maintained a relationship with James, however distant and constrained by circumstances. She'd known about this cabin, visited it, kept that entire part of her life hidden. "When I found you'd set up camp a few miles from here, I couldn't believe it," Marcus went on. "It felt like fate or something, like Mum was still orchestrating things from wherever she is. I stayed here and watched you, made sure you were okay. But I couldn't make myself approach you. What was I going to say? How was I going to explain? You could have just told me the truth, Evan said. I know that now, but at the time it felt impossible. And the longer I waited, the harder it got. Marcus paused, staring into his soup. There's more you need to know. Evan waited, sensing his son wasn't finished. James is still alive. He lives about 30 miles from here, in a small house near Grand Marais. He's sick, Dad. Cancer. Stage 4. He has maybe 3 months left, probably less. The revelation hit Evan hard. James Haldren wasn't just a figure from the past, a man in old letters. He was real, present, dying. He contacted me 3 months ago, Marcus continued. Sent a letter to my apartment, said he'd hired a private investigator to find the family, that he needed to talk to me about something important. I almost didn't respond, but I don't know. Curiosity? Guilt? I called him. What did he want? To meet Lucy. Just once, before he dies. He said he's never asked for anything, never intruded, respected Mum's wishes for 26 years. But he's dying, and he wants to see his daughter, just to meet her, to tell her about her mother from his perspective. Marcus looked up, meeting Evan's eyes, and to give her medical information. He has a genetic condition, something that runs in his family. Lucy should be tested for it. Early detection could save her life, if she has it. Evan sat back, processing. This wasn't just about past secrets and hurt feelings. This was about Lucy's health, her future, her right to know her full medical history. Does Lucy know about any of this? He asked. Marcus shook his head. I didn't tell her. Or Sarah. I've been carrying this alone, trying to figure out what to do. If I tell them about James wanting to meet Lucy, I have to explain why, which means revealing everything. And Lucy made me promise we'd never tell you, that we'd just stay away and let you live your life without this burden. That was never her choice to make, Evan said, more sharply than he intended. He softened his tone. I appreciate that you were all trying to protect me, but you took away my agency. You made decisions about my life, my relationships with my children, without including me. That's not protection, Marcus. That's control. Marcus nodded, tears threatening again. You're right. We were wrong. I was wrong. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling, Koda snoring softly by the hearth. Outside, night had fully fallen, and the temperature was dropping fast. The cabin's windows showed only darkness and the reflection of the room's interior. Tell me about James, Evan said finally. What's he like? Marcus seemed surprised by the question, but answered. Quiet. Kind. He spent his whole life up here, guiding canoe trips, teaching wilderness survival courses. Never married. He said he couldn't that loving Mom the way he did, even from a distance, made it impossible to fully commit to anyone else. He has a lot of respect for you, Dad. Said you're the man he wishes he could have been. That you gave Lucy the stable family life he couldn't provide. Evan felt something shift in his chest. He'd expected to hate James, to see him as a threat or a betrayal. But from everything he'd learned, the letters, Marcus's description, James's actions, over the years he seemed like a decent man, caught in circumstances beyond his control. Someone who'd loved Anna, lost her, found her again too late, and spent the rest of his life honoring her choices, even when it cost him dearly. I want to meet him, Evan said. Marcus's eyes widened. What? I want to meet James. And I think Lucy should meet him too, if that's what she decides. But it has to be her choice. We're not going to keep making decisions for her. Dad, I don't know if that's... We're going to bring the family together, Evan said firmly. All of us. You're going to contact your sisters, tell them where we are, what's happened. We're going to sit down and talk about this like adults. And then We're going to let Lucy decide if she wants to meet her biological father before he dies." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled his phone from his jacket pocket. "No signal here, but there's a ranger station about 20 miles south. We could hike there tomorrow, use their phone." "Then that's what we'll do." They spent the rest of the evening talking, filling in gaps, sharing perspectives. Marcus told him about Sarah's engagement. She was getting married in 3 months to a man named David, a software engineer she'd been dating for 2 years. He told him about Lucy's promotion at the hospital, how she'd been recognized for excellence in patient care. He told him about his own struggles with depression after Anna's death, how teaching had become increasingly difficult, how he'd questioned whether he was in the right profession. Evan listened, asked questions, offered what advice he could. It felt like the first real conversation they'd had in years, maybe ever. Marcus had always been the quiet one, harder to draw out. But here, in this isolated cabin, far from the complications of ordinary life, barriers came down. As they prepared to sleep, Marcus in the loft, Evan on the floor by the fire with blankets Marcus provided, Evan felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not everything was fixed. There were still difficult conversations ahead, wounds to heal, decisions to make. But for the first time since his children had disappeared from his life, he could see a path forward. "Dad?" Marcus called softly from the loft. "Yeah? I missed you. All this time, watching you from a distance, I missed you so much." "I missed you too, son." In the darkness, Evan heard Marcus's breathing eventually settle into the rhythm of sleep. Koda shifted closer, pressing his warm weight against Evan's side. The fire burned low, casting dancing shadows on the cabin's log walls. Tomorrow they would hike to the ranger station. Tomorrow they would begin the work of bringing the family back together. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, Evan wasn't alone. They set out at first light, Koda leading the way through the snow. The morning was brutally cold, the kind of cold that made breath freeze in your beard and turned exposed skin painful within minutes. But the sky was clear, and Marcus knew the route well. The hike took most of the day. The snow was deep in places, requiring them to break trail. They took turns, leading, the follower stepping in the broken path, conserving energy. It was hard work, but Evan found himself grateful for it. The physical exertion gave him something to focus on besides the emotional turbulence of the past 24 hours. They stopped at midday to rest and eat. Marcus had packed food from the cabin, dried meat, hard cheese, trail mix. They sat on a fallen log, sharing the meal while Koda ranged nearby, investigating scents. "There's one more thing," Marcus said as they ate. "Something I haven't told you yet." Evan waited, chewing slowly. Marcus pulled a folded envelope from his inside jacket pocket. "Mom wrote this. Her lawyer gave it to me about a month ago, after I contacted James. Apparently she left instructions that it should only be delivered if certain conditions were met specifically, if James ever reached out to the family." The envelope was cream-colored, expensive paper, Anna's handwriting on the front, "To my children, with love and truth, Mom." "Have you read it?" Evan asked. "Yes. That's why I knew I had to find you, had to figure this out. Sarah and Lucy haven't seen it yet. I needed to talk to you first, after I read what she said." "What does it say?" Marcus handed him the envelope. "You should read it yourself." Evan opened it carefully, unfolding the pages inside. There were 3 sheets, covered in Anna's distinctive handwriting, elegant, flowing, the letters carefully formed, even though he knew she'd been very weak when she wrote this. The date at the top was April 2019, just weeks before she died. "My dearest Sarah, Marcus and Lucy," the letter began. "If you're reading this, it means James has reached out to you, which means he's probably dying. I'm sorry I'm not there to help you through this revelation. I'm sorry I kept secrets that will hurt you. But please understand, I did what I thought was best at the time, and I need you to know the whole truth now that I'm gone." James Haldren was my first love. We met in college and planned to marry after he completed his Navy service. When he was reported dead in 1990, I grieved deeply. I thought I'd never love anyone again. Then I met your father, Evan, and discovered that grief doesn't mean love is finished. Evan was kind, steady, good. He made me laugh. He made me feel safe. I fell in love with him differently than I loved James, but no less truly. We married, we had Sarah, then Marcus. We built a life together. I was happy. I truly was. Then James came back from the dead. It was 1995, 4 years into my marriage, and suddenly the man I'd mourned was standing in a coffee shop in Minneapolis, alive and searching for me. The shock of it nearly broke me. But by then, I had a husband I loved and 2 children who needed me. I couldn't just abandon everything for a ghost from my past. James and I talked. We decided to remain friends, nothing more. He moved up north, built a quiet life. We exchanged letters occasionally, nothing inappropriate, just 2 old friends staying in touch. That should have been the end of it. But in 1997, James invited me to see his new cabin, the land he'd bought. I told Evan I was visiting college friends, a lie I'm not proud of. I told myself it would be innocent, just a weekend to provide closure on a relationship that had never properly ended. It wasn't innocent. I won't give you details you don't need, but we spent that weekend together as more than friends. It was a mistake, or maybe it wasn't. I still don't know. What I do know is that when I came home, I was pregnant with Lucy. I had to make a choice. The father could have been Evan or James. The timing made both possible. I could have told Evan the truth, risked everything, demanded we work through it together. Or I could stay silent, raise the baby as ours, protect our family from falling apart. I chose silence. And when Lucy was born and I saw her, I knew in my heart she was James's daughter. Something about her eyes, her features. She looked like photos of James as a baby that he'd shown me years before. I never told Evan. I let him love Lucy completely, be her father in every way. And he was. He is. Whatever biology says, Evan Calder is Lucy's father. He earned that title through love and presence and sacrifice. I told James the truth. He wanted to be part of Lucy's life, but I refused. I told him he could write to me occasionally, ask about her in general terms, but that was all. He accepted this with more grace than I deserved. He never pushed, never demanded rights, never threatened to reveal the truth. He stepped back and let Evan be Lucy's father. Now I'm dying, and I can't protect you from this truth anymore. If you're reading this, it means James is dying too, and he probably wants to meet Lucy before he goes. You need to make a decision about whether to tell your father, whether to facilitate that meeting, whether to blow up the family I spent decades protecting. Here's what I want you to know. Your father is not a fool. He's smart and perceptive, and part of me wonders if he sensed something was different about Lucy, but chose to love her anyway. Or maybe he never noticed because biology doesn't matter to him the way it might matter to other people. Either way, he deserves the truth. Tell him, not to hurt him, but to honor him. He earned honesty through years of being the best father any of you could have asked for, and let Lucy decide about meeting James. She deserves to know where she comes from, to have complete information about her medical history, to make her own choices. I made my choices, for better or worse. Now you need to make yours. But whatever you decide, remember this. Evan loved me completely, loved all of you completely, and he deserves to be treated with dignity and honesty. Don't shut him out to protect him. Don't make decisions for him. Trust him to handle the truth with the same grace he's shown throughout his life. I love you all. I'm sorry for the burden of these secrets, but I'm not sorry for the family we built, imperfect as it was. Take care of each other. Take care of your father. He's going to need you, especially after I'm gone. With all my love, Mom. Evan read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face by the end. Anna's voice came through so clearly, her humor, her love, her recognition of her own flaws and compromises. She'd seen him clearly, valued what he'd given their family, trusted him to handle the truth. "She wanted us to tell you," Marcus said quietly. "She knew it would hurt, but she wanted us to trust you with it." "But you couldn't," Evan said. "We were afraid. And then it got complicated when James contacted me, and I didn't know." Marcus stopped, composing himself. "I was a coward, Dad. We all were." Evan folded the letter carefully, handed it back to Marcus. "Keep it safe. Sarah and Lucy need to read it." They resumed hiking, the afternoon sun slanting through the pines. Evan's mind churned through everything he'd learned. Anna's love for him had been real. He could see that now. She hadn't stayed out of obligation or resignation. She genuinely loved him, had chosen him repeatedly over the years when she could have left. And James had shown remarkable restraint and honor, stepping back, letting Evan be Lucy's father, never asserting biological claims. The man deserved respect for that, maybe even gratitude. By late afternoon, they reached the ranger station, a small building that served as a waypoint for hikers and a check-in for wilderness permits. It was manned by a single ranger, a woman in her 50s named Deirdre, who clearly knew Marcus. "Thought you'd frozen to death out there," she said when she saw him. "Been weeks since you checked in." "Got snowed in," Marcus replied. "Deirdre, this is my father, Evan." She shook Evan's hand, her grip firm. "Family reunion in the woods. That's either very sweet or very complicated." "Both," Evan said, managing a small smile. They used the station's landline to make calls. Marcus tried Sarah first. She answered on the second ring. "Marcus. Oh my God, Marcus, where have you been? We've been so worried." "I'm okay, Sarah. I'm with Dad." Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, "You told him." "He figured it out. Found my journal, the letters. He knows everything." "And?" Marcus looked at Evan. "He wants to see you. Both of you. He wants to talk, all of us together." Sarah's voice came through the phone line, shaky with emotion. "Is his dad angry?" Marcus looked at Evan, who stepped closer to the phone. "I'm here, Sarah. I'm not angry. I'm hurt that you all felt you had to disappear, but I'm not angry. Dad." She started crying. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you right away. I did, but Lucy was so scared, and Marcus thought we needed time to process, and then it had been so long that I didn't know how to—" "It's okay," Evan interrupted gently. "We're going to work through this, but I need you and Lucy to meet us. Can you do that?" "When? Where?" "There's a small inn called the Pinewood Lodge, about 40 miles west of Grun Marais. Can you get there by tomorrow evening?" "Yes, absolutely. I'll call Lucy right now, drive up to get her, we'll be there." "Sarah," Evan said, "tell her I love her. Tell her nothing has changed about that." "I will." A pause. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, sweetheart." Marcus took the phone back, gave Sarah more specific directions, then hung up. He looked at Evan. "Lucy's going to be harder." "I know." Marcus dialed Lucy's number. It rang 6 times before she answered, her voice guarded. "Marcus?" "Hey, Luce. Where are you?" "It's been months. Do you have any idea what that's been like for me and Sarah, not knowing if you were—" "I'm with Dad." The line went silent except for the faint sound of breathing. "Lucy, you told him." Her voice was flat, emotionless in the way people sound when they're trying very hard not to feel. "He found out. He's been in the woods too, Lucy. I've been watching him, making sure he was okay, and he found the cabin, and it's a long story. But he knows. About James, about the DNA tests, about everything. I have to go. Lucy, wait. I can't do this. I can't. Lucy, he wants to talk to you. He's right here. He's not angry. He loves you. He thinks he does. But when he really processes it, when he realizes I'm not his... Evan took the phone from Marcus. "Lucy, stop." The sound of his voice seemed to freeze her. He could hear her breathing, rapid and shallow, almost panicked. "You are my daughter," he said firmly. "You have been since the moment I held you in the hospital 26 years ago. I don't care what a DNA test says. I don't care who provided half your genetics. You are mine, and I am yours, and nothing changes that." "Daddy." The word came out broken, barely a whisper. She hadn't called him that since she was a little girl. "Sarah's going to come get you. You're going to meet us tomorrow at the Pinewood Lodge. We're going to sit down and talk about this like a family, all of us together. I'm scared." "I know. But you don't have to be. I'm still your father. I will always be your father." He heard her crying, trying to muffle it. "Okay," she finally managed. "Okay, I'll be there." After they hung up, Evan sat heavily in one of the station's chairs. The calls had taken more out of him than the day's hike. Deirdre diplomatically busied herself with paperwork at her desk, giving them space. Marcus sat across from him. "There's one more call we should make." "James." "Yeah, he gave me his number, asked me to contact him if anything changed." Evan nodded. "Do it." Marcus dialed. The phone rang 4 times before a man answered, his voice rough and weak. "Hello? Mr. Holdren, it's Marcus Calder." "Marcus." A cough then. "I wasn't sure I'd hear from you again. I'm here with my father. With Evan. We've talked. He knows everything." A long pause. "Evan's there? With you?" "Yes," Marcus said. Do you want to talk to him?" Another pause, longer this time. "If he's willing." Marcus held out the phone. Evan took it, his heart pounding. This was the man who'd loved Anna first, who'd given Lucy half her genetics, who'd been a shadow presence in their family for decades without ever meeting him. "James, this is Evan Calder." "Evan." The name came out carefully, weighted with history and emotion. I don't know what to say. Marcus told me you're sick. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I've got maybe 2 months. Probably less. I'm sorry to hear that." "Thank you. That's kind of you." James coughed again, a wet, painful sound. "I never meant to cause harm. I want you to know that. When we reconnected, it wasn't to hurt you or disrupt your family. It just happened. And then we tried to manage it as best we could." "I know," Evan said. "I've read the letters, all of them. Then I stepped back. I let you be Lucy's father because that's what Anna wanted, and because it was the right thing to do. You gave her the family I couldn't provide. The stability, the presence, the daily love. Those things matter more than biology." Evan felt something shift in his chest, not anger or resentment, but a complicated kind of respect. "Marcus said you want to meet Lucy." "I do. Just once, before I die. I'd like to tell her about her mother from my perspective, give her some photos Anna gave me over the years. And there's medical information she needs. I have a genetic condition that's treatable if caught early. She should be tested. We're bringing the family together tomorrow. Lucy's scared, confused, but she's agreed to come. If she decides she wants to meet you after we've talked, I'll support that, but it has to be her choice." "Of course." "I would never." James broke off, coughing. When he spoke again, his voice was strained. "Thank you, Evan, for being willing to even consider this. I know it can't be easy." "No," Evan admitted, "it's not. But Lucy deserves to know her full story, and you deserve to meet your daughter before you die, if that's what she wants." They talked for another 10 minutes. James told him about his life up north, the guiding business he'd run, the simple existence he'd built. He spoke about Anna with reverence and regret, clearly still in love with her, even after all these years. "She loved you," James said near the end of their conversation. "I want you to know that. She chose you, repeatedly, when she could have chosen differently. That meant something." "I know. Take care of Lucy. She's, she's my daughter biologically, but she's yours in every way that counts. Don't let this revelation change how you see her." "It won't," Evan promised. After they hung up, Marcus booked 2 rooms at the Pinewood Lodge, one for Evan and himself, one for Sarah and Lucy. They arranged to borrow snowshoes from Deirdre for the hike back to the cabin, then would drive Marcus's truck, which he'd left at a trailhead 5 miles south of the ranger station. "You have a truck?" Evan asked. "You've been out here with a vehicle this whole time?" Marcus had the grace to look sheepish. "I wasn't completely cut off from civilization, just from the family. I'd hike out every couple weeks to check messages, get supplies." They stayed at the ranger station that night, sleeping on cots Deirdre provided. In the morning, they hiked back to retrieve Marcus's truck, a process that took most of the day. The vehicle was buried in snow, but they dug it out and got it started. As they drove toward the Pinewood Lodge, Evan watched the forest pass by the windows. So much had changed in just a few days. He'd gone from isolated and abandoned to reconnected with his son, aware of family secrets that explained everything, and tentatively hopeful about healing the rifts that had torn them apart. But the hardest part was still ahead, facing Lucy, convincing her she was still his daughter, helping her navigate the revelation of her biological father's existence and impending death. They arrived at the lodge in late afternoon. It was a rustic place, all dark wood and stone fireplaces, the kind of establishment that catered to hikers and fishermen. The owner, a man named Frank who looked like he'd stepped out of a Paul Bunyan legend, showed them to their room. "Your daughter's called ahead," Frank said. "Said they'll be here around 6. Daughters, plural." Evan clung to that word. He and Marcus cleaned up, changed into the spare clothes Marcus had in his truck. Evan looked at himself in the bathroom mirror, gaunt, bearded, older than he remembered. The wilderness had marked him, but so had the months of grief and isolation. He looked like a man who'd been through something, which he supposed he had. At exactly 6 o'clock, they heard a vehicle pull up outside. Evan's heart began to pound. Through the window, he saw Sarah emerge from the driver's seat of a silver sedan. She looked tired, her blonde hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, her face drawn with stress. The passenger door opened more slowly. Lucy stepped out. She looked small, fragile, her dark hair whipping in the evening wind. She glanced toward the lodge, and even from a distance, Evan could see the fear in her posture, shoulders hunched, arms wrapped around herself protectively. Marcus put a hand on Evan's shoulder. "Ready?" "No," Evan admitted. They went downstairs to the lodge's common room, where Frank had arranged chairs in a circle near one of the fireplaces. Koda followed, sensing the importance of the moment, staying close to Evan's side. The door opened. Sarah entered first, and when she saw Evan, she froze. Then she rushed forward, throwing her arms around him. "Dad! Oh, God! Dad!" He held her tightly, this daughter who'd tried so hard to do the right thing and gotten tangled in impossible choices. "I'm here, sweetheart. It's okay." Lucy stood in the doorway, watching. Her eyes met Evan's over Sarah's shoulder, and in them he saw everything: fear, love, guilt, desperate hope. He gently released Sarah and crossed the room to Lucy. She didn't move, rooted to the spot like a deer caught in headlights. "Lucy," he said softly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry for everything. Come here." She shook her head, tears starting. "You don't understand. I'm not really your—" "Yes, you are." He closed the distance between them, took her face in his hands the way he had when she was little. "You are my daughter. You have always been my daughter. Nothing changes that. Do you understand me?" "Nothing." Lucy broke down, sobbing against his chest the way she had as a child after nightmares or scraped knees. Evan held her, one hand on her head, the other around her shoulders, anchoring her through the storm of emotion. "I thought you'd hate me," she choked out between sobs. "I thought once you knew, you'd look at me differently." like I wasn't yours anymore. Never, he said firmly. Not for 1 second. You've been mine since the moment I held you in that hospital. A piece of paper with test results doesn't change 26 years of being your father. Sarah joined them, wrapping her arms around both of them. Then Marcus came over, and suddenly they were all holding each other in the middle of the lodge's common room, a family reunited after months of painful separation. Frank discreetly disappeared into the back, giving them privacy. Eventually, they separated, wiping eyes and trying to compose themselves. They moved to the circle of chairs, settling in. Koda positioned himself between Evan and Lucy, as if understanding she needed extra comfort. I need to tell you both some things, Evan said, looking at Sarah and Lucy. Marcus has already heard most of it, but you two deserve to know what I've learned. He told them about finding the cabin, discovering Marcus's journal, reading the letters between Anna and James. He told them about Anna's final letter, her wishes that they trust him with the truth. Sarah listened intently, nodding at points, clearly processing. Lucy kept her eyes on her hands, occasionally reaching down to stroke Koda's fur. When Evan finished, Sarah spoke first. We should have told you immediately. I knew that. I wanted to. But Lucy was so scared, and Marcus thought we needed time, and then... She stopped, shaking her head. We made the wrong choice. We hurt you, and we hurt each other, and I'm so sorry. I understand why you did it, Evan said. You were trying to protect everyone, but secrets don't protect people. They isolate them. Lucy finally looked up. I couldn't bear the thought of you looking at me and seeing, I don't know, a reminder of Mum's betrayal, or just not seeing your daughter anymore. Lucy. Evan leaned forward, making sure she was meeting his eyes. Do you remember when you were 7 and you broke your arm falling out of that tree? She nodded, confused by the question. I sat with you in the emergency room for 6 hours while they waited for the swelling to go down enough to set it. You were so brave, trying not to cry, even though I knew it hurt. And I remember thinking, this is my daughter, strong and brave and mine. That feeling, that certainty, it didn't come from biology. It came from knowing you, raising you, being there for you. He pulled out his wallet, opened it to show her the plastic hospital bracelet he'd kept. Baby girl Calder, I've carried this every day since they gave you to me, because you were mine then, and you're mine now, and you'll be mine when I'm old and grey, and you're taking care of me. Fresh tears streamed down Lucy's face, but she was smiling through them. You kept my hospital bracelet? Of course I did. Just like I kept Sarah's first drawing and Marcus's Little League trophy. You're my children, all 3 of you. That's not negotiable. Sarah reached across and took Lucy's hand. He's right, Luce. We've been idiots, thinking biology mattered more than everything else. Dad's our father, because he chose to be, every single day. Marcus nodded. I watched him in the woods for months. He was alone and hurting, but he kept going, kept surviving. And you know what he had with him? Photos of us. He'd look at them every night by the fire. That's not the behavior of a man who'd reject his daughter over a DNA test. Lucy looked around at her family, her father, her siblings, and something seemed to settle in her. The fear that had haunted her for months finally began to ease. There's something else, Evan said gently. James Holdren wants to meet you. He's dying, Lucy. He has maybe 2 months left. He wants to give you information about your medical history, show you photos of your mother from before I knew her, and just see you, once. That's all he's asking. Lucy tensed. I don't know if I can. You don't have to decide right now, Evan assured her. But I've talked to him. He's a good man who's respected our family for 26 years. He never tried to interfere, never claimed rights he could have claimed. He stepped back and let me be your father. That took courage and selflessness. What if I meet him and feel I don't know, pulled toward him? What if it confuses everything? Then we'll work through it together, Evan said. But Lucy, he has medical information you need. He has a genetic condition that you should be tested for. Even if you don't want a relationship with him, you need that information." Sarah squeezed Lucy's hand. "We'll all be there with you. If you decide to go, you won't be alone." Lucy looked at Evan. "Would you come with me?" "Absolutely," he said without hesitation. "Whatever you need." They talked late into the night, years of distance and silence giving way to honest conversation. Sarah told them about David, her fiancé, showed them photos on her phone. Marcus talked about his leave of absence from teaching, his realization that he needed to make some changes in his life. Lucy spoke about her work at the hospital, the patients who'd touched her, the moments that reminded her why she'd chosen nursing. It felt like a family again, broken in places, scarred, but healing. By the time they went to their rooms, it was past midnight. Evan lay awake for a while, listening to Marcus's steady breathing from the other bed. He thought about Anna, wondered what she'd think of how this had all unfolded. He hoped she'd be proud of them for finally facing the truth, for choosing honesty and connection over protective silence. In the morning, they gathered for breakfast in the lodge's small dining room. Lucy looked steadier, more resolved. As they ate, she said quietly, "I want to meet him. James, I want to meet him today, if that's possible." Everyone stopped, looking at her. "You're sure?" Evan asked. She nodded. "I've been thinking about it all night. You're right, I need the medical information. And he's dying, and he's my biological father. I should meet him at least once, to know where I came from, fully." "I'll call him," Marcus offered. "Set something up." An hour later, they were driving toward Grand Marais in 2 vehicles. Sarah and Marcus went in Sarah's car, while Evan and Lucy took Marcus's truck, Koda riding in the back. The drive was quiet at first, Lucy staring out the window at the snow-covered landscape. "Are you nervous?" Evan asked after a while. "Terrified," she admitted. "What if I don't know what to say? What if he's disappointed in who I turned out to be?" "Lucy, you're a nurse who saves lives. You're kind and compassionate and strong. No one could be disappointed in you. Do you think—" She stopped, struggling with the words. "Do you think Mum loved him more than she loved you?" Evan considered the question carefully. "I think she loved us differently. First, loves are intense, all-consuming. What she had with James was that young love, full of possibility. What we had was partnership, building a life together, raising children, facing hardships side by side. Both are real love, just different kinds. But she chose you. She did, repeatedly. Even when James came back, even when she could have left, she chose our family." Lucy was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad she did. Choose you, I mean. I can't imagine having anyone else as my dad." The words settled into Evan's chest, warm and healing. James's house was small, set back from the road with Lake Superior visible in the distance. Smoke rose from the chimney. Marcus's truck was already parked in the driveway when they arrived. They all went to the door together, a united front. Marcus knocked. The man who answered was gaunt, clearly ravaged by illness. But his eyes were sharp and kind, and when he saw Lucy, they filled with tears. The resemblance was unmistakable, the same dark hair, the same hazel eyes, the same shape to the face. "Lucy," he said softly. "Mr. Holdren," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Please, call me James." He stepped back, inviting them in. "Thank you for coming, all of you." The interior was spare but comfortable. Photos lined the walls, many of them featuring Anna at various ages. Lucy moved toward them, drawn by images of her mother she'd never seen. Anna, young and laughing in college, Anna on a canoe trip, Anna standing in front of the cabin Evan had found in the woods. James watched Lucy study the photos. She was remarkable, smart, funny, brave. "I loved her from the moment I met her." "She loved you too," Lucy said quietly. "I read her letters, but she loved your father more, Or at least she loved him in a way that made more sense for the life she wanted. I've made peace with that. They sat down, James moving slowly, clearly in pain. He gave Lucy a leather-bound photo album. These are all yours. Photos of your mother from before any of you were born. Stories about her that no one else knows. I want you to have them. Lucy opened the album carefully. Sarah and Marcus leaning in to look. The photos showed a version of their mother they'd never known, younger, carefree, full of possibility. James also provided medical records explaining the genetic condition in detail. It's manageable if caught early. You should be tested within the month. Your doctor will know what to look for. Lucy took the documents, nodding. I want you to know, James said, looking directly at Evan. I'm grateful. For 26 years, you gave Lucy everything I couldn't. Stability, presence, a father's love. That's not nothing. That's everything. Evan nodded, finding unexpected kinship with this dying man who'd loved the same woman, fathered the same daughter, but chosen sacrifice over claim. They stayed for an hour, James sharing stories, Lucy asking careful questions, the family bearing witness to this strange, necessary meeting. As they prepared to leave, James asked to speak with Lucy alone for a moment. The others stepped outside, giving them privacy. Through the window, Evan watched his daughter and her biological father talk quietly. James said something that made Lucy nod, tears on her cheeks. Then, in a gesture that surprised everyone, Lucy hugged him, brief but genuine. When she emerged, her face was peaceful in a way it hadn't been before. What did he say? Sarah asked as they walked to the vehicles. That he was grateful I existed, even if he couldn't be part of my life. That knowing I turned out to be a good person made all the sacrifice worth it. Lucy looked at Evan, and he said that real fatherhood isn't about biology. It's about showing up every day, which is what you did. They drove back to the Pinewood Lodge, but instead of going to their rooms, they sat in the common area talking about the future. Sarah showed them her wedding invitation officially, asked Evan to walk her down the aisle. Marcus announced he'd decided to move back closer to Brainerd, maybe try teaching in a smaller district where he could make more impact. Lucy asked Evan to stay with her for a while, said her spare room was his if he wanted it. For the first time in months, they made plans together. Sunday dinners became a promise, not just a hope. Sarah's wedding in March became something they'd all attend as a family. The holidays, rapidly approaching, became opportunities to rebuild traditions. I want to tell you all something, Evan said as evening fell. When I went into the woods, I thought I was done, that I'd lost my family, that there was nothing left worth staying for. But you three, even when you were gone, even when I couldn't reach you, you were still the reason I kept going. The thought that someday, maybe, I'd understand what happened, that I'd find a way back to you that kept me alive through some pretty dark days. We were idiots, Marcus said bluntly. We almost lost you because we were too scared to trust you with the truth. But we didn't lose him, Lucy countered. And we won't. Not anymore. Sarah raised her coffee cup. To family. Complicated, messy, imperfect family. They all raised their cups, even Koda lifting his head as if in agreement. Over the following weeks, life found a new rhythm. Evan moved into Lucy's spare room temporarily, finding comfort in the daily routines of her life. She'd come home from her shifts exhausted, and he'd have dinner ready, something simple but warm. They'd eat together, talking about her day, his plans, the gradual process of rebuilding their relationship. Lucy got tested for the genetic condition James had warned about. The results came back negative, but she was grateful for the knowledge, for understanding her complete medical history. Marcus found an apartment in Brainerd, close to Evan's old house. He applied for teaching positions and was hired at a middle school 20 minutes away. He and Evan fell into a pattern of fishing on weekends, not talking much, just being together in the way they'd always been most comfortable. Sarah's wedding plans accelerated. She and David came up from Minneapolis several times to finalize details. David was good for her, steady, kind, able to make her laugh even when she was stressed. He welcomed Evan warmly, clearly relieved that the family was reconnecting. In late January, they received word that James had passed away peacefully in his sleep. Lucy took it hard, grieving for a man she'd only met once, but who represented an entire unlived possibility. They attended his small funeral, just the four of them, and a handful of his wilderness guide colleagues. James had left a letter for Lucy, to be given to her after his death. In it, he thanked her for meeting him, told her how proud he was of the person she'd become, and encouraged her to maintain the relationship with Evan and her siblings. "You were given two fathers," he'd written, "one through biology, one through choice and presence. But only one of them earned the title through decades of love and sacrifice. Honor that. Honor him. Be grateful for the family you have, because it's rarer and more precious than you know." Lucy framed the letter and hung it in her apartment, a reminder of grace and sacrifice. March arrived with the promise of spring. Sarah's wedding was everything she'd hoped for, small, elegant, full of love. Evan walked her down the aisle, his heart full, as he gave her to David. Marcus stood as best man, Lucy as maid of honor. They were a family again, visible and united. At the reception, during the father-daughter dance, Sarah whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on us." "I never could," Evan replied. "You're my children. That's permanent." Later, as the celebration wound down, Evan stood outside the venue, looking at the stars. The northern Minnesota sky was clear, the constellations bright and familiar. He thought about Anna, wondered if she could see them now, their children happy, the family intact despite everything. Lucy came out to join him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the cool evening air. "What are you thinking about?" "Your mother. How she carried secrets for so long to protect all of us. How hard that must have been. Do you forgive her?" Evan considered the question. "I was never angry with her. Hurt, yes, confused, but not angry. She made choices in impossible situations, and she tried to do right by everyone. That's all any of us can do." Lucy leaned against him, and he put his arm around her shoulders. "I'm glad Koda led you to that cabin." "Me too. You know what I realized? That whole time you were in the woods, you weren't really alone. Marcus was watching over you, Mum was watching over you, in her way, and Koda was taking care of you. Even when you felt abandoned, you were still surrounded by love." Evan smiled. "I suppose I was." They stood there together, father and daughter, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Inside, the celebration continued, music and laughter, and the joy of family reunited. Outside, in the quiet darkness, a different kind of peace settled. The cabin in the woods remained empty now, no longer needed. It had served its purpose, bringing secrets to light, forcing confrontations that needed to happen, providing shelter in the storm. Perhaps someday another lost soul would find it and discover their own path back to the people they loved. But for Evan and his children, the journey was complete. They'd walked through the wilderness, literal and metaphorical, and found their way home to each other. The scars remained, would always remain, but they were healing. And in the end, that was enough. Koda barked once from inside, impatient for attention. Lucy laughed and pulled Evan toward the door. "Come on. Marcus is trying to give a speech, and you know how that goes." They went back inside, back to the warmth and noise and complicated beauty of family. Together, finally, as it should be.